show this and this visually. This is the way we know you interact with this kind of technology. So this is something, there's like no roadmap. And that's really, fascinating from a designer's perspective, because we can actually design things for the first time.
Quantum computing can feel abstract, even intimidating. But what if the real breakthrough isn't just in the physics? It's in how we interact with it. Welcome to Impact Quantum.
Well, hello and welcome back to Impact Quantum, the podcast where we continuing to explore the emerging field of quantum technologies. And you don't need to be a PhD in particle physics. You just need to be a little bit curious. So with me, as always, is the most quantum curious person I know, Candice Gahuli. How's it going, Candice?
It's great. Thank you so much. Hello. Today, we have someone really exciting. We have Clem. I'm going to mispronounce the name and I apologize. Yankovic. Yeah, I didn't do that right. But she is the head of design at Classic. And Clem, can you please pronounce your name properly for us?
Hi. So first of all, thank you for having me. It's very exciting for me as well. And you said it nearly okay. So it's Clem Yankiewicz with a bit of a Polish accent.
And the emphasis on that middle syllable, I guess.
Yeah.
So awesome. So you are the second person we've had from Classic. And it's funny because the last time we spoke, I learned that it was not Classique. It's Classic with a Q.
Yes.
So what do you do at Classic?
So I'm the head of design. And because I'm a designer, my background is it's actually in industrial design. And at Classic, we're making quantum computing software. So my role is leading all the design initiatives for the software. So the user experience and interface design.
Which I think was important because I think, well, one, I have a lot of questions, but it's important. I've always been a big fan of good user experience. I think humanity is also a good fan. If you take a look at Apple's market share, right? They are kind of I don't know if they're the best, but they're held up certainly in terms of software as the gold standard, for lack of a better term. But so tell me, like, who are the users, right? Because that's the first question. Are these developers? Are they physicists? Are they business analysts? Who is the primary user of Classic software?
So, of course, the developers, the physicists, there's a lot of students. I think in general, in this industry, a lot of the users are people who are studying quantum related fields. But also, we can think about the users in terms of business stakeholders. So I think the kind of entire quantum industry. And I think everyone needs a different way. And it's not only Classic, I think in general, the quantum technologies. So we need all those different ways to interact with this technology, depending on the user, but also depending on the use case. And sometimes, or most of the time, maybe code is the best one. But I do believe that there's also place for the interactive and more graphical user interfaces that I design.
So what inspired you initially to take your industrial design skills and bring them into the quantum computing sector?
So I've been working with the quantum industry for over 6 years now. In the last 2.5 years, around 2.5 years, a bit more with Classic. And before that, I worked with a few different companies and research centers. And before that, I did a lot of I worked with a lot of different industries, a lot with the culture, with education. And at a certain point, I was interested in researching unusual ways to interact with technology. This was before I discovered the quantum industry, but I was interested in, the interfaces beyond the typical interface that would, we just like open our phone or laptop. And I was doing project with theater, for example, where the actors would use some interactive electronic installations I designed, or I did project for children. And at certain point through those projects, I was invited to CQT, at Center for Quantum Technologies at the National University of Singapore. I was invited there because of those interests to work on a computer game about quantum physics. And I had no knowledge about the quantum industry and quantum physics before that. And I went there. We were a group there were a few physicists, software developers, and I joined from the design side. And then I discovered, wow, this is the most interesting industry I've seen, and it's something that I want to continue working with. And so that's how it started. And definitely I love this industry since then.
That proves our thesis that we had. Like, you're going to need marketers, you're going to need designers, industrial designers, right? This is going to be an ecosystem that is being built, right? And if you take a look at, let's pick on NVIDIA, right? Because they're a $5 trillion company, right? Not everyone there is a gamer. Not everyone there is a chip designer, right? You need an entire ecosystem. And I think that's really where the majority of the opportunity is for everyone, right? Like, what was your first reaction when they asked you to write a quantum, to go to the Quantum Institute? Like, you were like, what's this quantum stuff? Like, I'm just curious, like, what was the first thought that ran through your mind?
Oh, to be honest, I thought it's going to look so funny on my resume.
Right.
I didn't think of it, as a career, or more as like, a very interesting project that I'll do, and and it's going to Singapore and working with scientists. So I thought it's like, oh, it's going to be really fun, and something to try. But I definitely didn't think that it would become a career. And that's something that I discovered there. I just thought it was just so fascinating.
Very cool.
So-
You've actually, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ken.
No, go ahead, Frank, go ahead.
So you've, looking at your LinkedIn, you've worked at more than one quantum firm. So clearly, like, this isn't just a one-off. This is it seems like that, whatever that first gig was, like, really did change the direction of your career.
Oh, definitely. And so it started like after CQT, because it was just a few months long project. Me and a physicist who actually brought me to this project, Piotr Migdał, we decided to keep working on this. And we turned this game about quantum physics into a virtual lab. Virtual quantum lab with visualization and simulation of quantum physics, and we've been working on this for a few years, and it's actually still being used, like, on a lot of universities. A lot of educators are still using this tool. It's called Quantum Flytrap. Anyone can use it online for free. And then we did a project with our team for Pascal, so the French quantum computing company. Also, we built a visual interactive interface for their technology. And then I worked for a while on a project with Xanadu, with Penny Lane team. And then I started working with Classic.
Very cool.
So there have been already a few quantum related places that I managed to work with.
Okay, so you mentioned the virtual labs. Do you also work now in real world lab experiences, or is it all virtual lab?
So what I'm doing, it's much more relevant for the virtual experience. I would love to do something with hardware related, because maybe because of my industrial design background, that's something that's, I really love the hardware part, but I feel that my experience is just much more relevant for the software part of the quantum computing stack. Although who knows, maybe, yeah, maybe in the future.
Interesting. What was the biggest thing that surprised you in terms of industrial design or graphic design or about quantum computing? Like, what was the concept that obviously you like it, right? So obviously, what fascinated you the most, really? Like, what made you think, wow, this is cool?
Yeah, so I mean, on the one hand, it just, not even in, regardless of design, it's just quantum physics and quantum computing. I think it's fascinating and just really, for me, it's really fun to work in an industry that I can keep learning, and that's just really interesting. But from the design perspective, the fact that we're dealing with things that are so unintuitive many ways, and we don't have this one way that, we know this is how we show this and this visually. This is the way we know you interact with this kind of technology. So this is something, there's like no roadmap. And that's really, fascinating from a designer's perspective, because we can actually design things for the first time. And this is something that nearly doesn't happen. I mean, there are nearly no chances to work on something that really no one yet worked on the kind of interfaces that are, and the technology in general, that it really is innovative. So this is, from the design perspective, is just fascinating. And yeah, so I'm very happy to have a privilege to be part of this.
So how do you define success for the user experience in a virtual lab environment?
So do you mean virtual lab is the project that I mentioned that we did?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, so in that project, I think, because we didn't monetize it, and it's open to everyone. So there was no part on like this typical commercial part. But I think the success is that it's still being used, and it's being used at the top universities like Stanford or Oxford. I know they're using it at NYU during their summer internship program at the Physics Institute. And one of the professors from NYU just published an introductory book to quantum computing that I know that he's using our lab there as well. So I think, the fact that users are actually using it, this is definitely a success with this project. And from the beginning, we were developing this project with the users. So a lot of features there, a lot of functionalities were developed because someone asked us for this. Someone would, email us and say, listen, like, I really want to use it with my students, but I really want to show them this and this experiment. Can you add this functionality? And we would be like, oh, actually, it's something we can do. So this is something that I actually really like about this project. And I think it's not always that easy to capture, even for, much bigger companies with large budgets, to be so close with the users and to actually make something that people are using. Because, we never had any marketing, and especially now that we don't actively work on this project anymore, and it's still just living its own life, and people are still using it. And I know a lot of students, a lot of physics students are using this.
Interesting.
I was at some physics conference a while ago, and I was presenting some things we do at Classic, and I met a physics professor from one of the universities in Europe. And we spoke, and I told him what I do and what we do at Classic, and he told me, like, listen, you need to see this project. I'm using it a lot with my students. And then he told me about quantum fly trap, so the virtual lab that I designed, the project that came out of CQT. So I think this is the success that someone tells me about the project I did, that, oh, you need to see it. It'll be very interesting for you. Yeah, so I think this is definitely the success. The success here is the users that are still using it and liking it, and still helps them.
That's really cool. Like, and people know you for that. And I would imagine, you know, people are still coming up to you. That's a cool feeling when that
Yeah,
happens.
yeah.
What's the one thing you wish people understood more about your industry?
The industry as the quantum technology
The
industry, or
design aspect within the design. Can it be the design aspect within quantum?
Oh yeah. You know, I think so. My perspective on why I think it's important, what I do, or why this design perspective in quantum is important. And I do think a lot of people understand it, but maybe not everyone. So I see user interfaces, any kind of user interfaces, as those different doors we have to the technology. So, you know, we have typical code interfaces, voice interfaces, the graphical, interactive interfaces. So all different ways to interact with this technology. And all those different doors that we open, they suit different people or different use cases. And the choice of what kind of interface we provide for this technology and how we design this interface is actually a choice of who can participate in this technology and how and to do what. And I really do believe that there is a place for those graphical, interactive interfaces, not, you know, instead of code, of course. Like, you know, code will always be probably the main interface for quantum industries. But I think there is a lot of users, there's a lot of use cases when the different types of interfaces are very important. And especially if we talk about, you know, broader participation, about technology that can affect everyone's lives, I think there's a lot of value in it. And it's not just, you know, sometimes I think design is perceived as making something, you know, not like pretty or nicer. And I think there's much more to it. And it's actually opening this technology to different users and for a broader participation.
Okay.
Interesting.
When you first begin a new project, what are the first design decisions you typically lock into?
So it really depends on the project, but usually, you know, it always starts with a lot of people together. So it's never me or, you know, designers. We don't design it in, you know, just like we're not closing ourselves and design it by ourselves. It's always a lot of brainstorming. You know, it would like software developers, physicists, product managers. So there's a lot of people with those different perspectives that we work together, and usually, yeah, it just starts with brainstorming and with some very, you know, broad concepts, like you know, like first ideas, and then I would try to sketch them very fast, because it's always easier to talk about things when you see them visually. And then, you know, I would show this to the team, and then we can talk about it again, and see what should be changed, what direction to take. So there's a lot of iterations, and definitely there's a lot of people involved.
So have there been any like user behaviors that have surprised you when you've been running one of these simulations? That has ever been anything that's really just kind of surprised you and made you rethink, you know, how you were going about it?
during the design process with the team.
Right.
So, for example, I remember when I was working with Penny Lane for a few months on a project. So I was working there mostly with their algorithms team, where they were all physicists. And it was really interesting because, I was trying to understand some specific topics they were telling me about, that I had to then find a way to visualize it and to think, how do we show it in a visual way? So, they will try to describe this to me, and then I would make the drawings, and then I would show it to them, and I remember a few times, like, they would be like, oh, actually, when I see it now, drawn, like, I actually think that it should be different. So I felt like it was very surprising for me, because I felt like it's kind of we're making this new language to describe something, because there is this mathematical language, and this is just the one way it's a great way, of course, it's the best way to describe the quantum phenomena. But when you need to build a different language to describe this, suddenly you need to think about it in a different way. So I at least hope that sometimes this it's also beneficial for the other side, for the physicists to work, for example, with designers, where you need to look at the problem from a different perspective.
Interesting. I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
So what do you consider right now to be your top professional achievement to date?
That's a good question. I think the fact that, I can work like that all those years, I keep working with the industry, and I'm working on tools. I'm working with the most talented, amazing people, and that we're working on tools for this new technology, and people are actually using it, and it's like it feels like an actual real impact, where I have this my tiny part, but I do feel this impact, and of course it's still the beginning, but I'm very happy about it, and I'm very happy that I feel like I can contribute something meaningful to the industry. So that's as a non-physicist, that's not a scientist, I feel very lucky about it.
That's a good point you bring up, because I would imagine that physics are kind of the top dog. Physicists are the top dogs in this field, right? What's it like being a non-physicist in a physics heavy industry?
So I actually really love working with physicists. And I think that's one of the things I discovered at CQT, and probably with scientists in general. And maybe it's a bit that, when I was a small child, I always loved math and drawing. And sometimes I would say that, whatever we liked as children, it's what we keep liking for forever. So sometimes I feel it's like I chose this creative direction for my life, but maybe this gives me back a bit of, I'm a bit closer to science and to math that I always liked as well. But I really like it, and probably the physicists that I meet and I work with are the ones that also like to work with non-physicists, and with the creative people from the creative industry and creative side. But I feel that like the people that I've learned so much from, and it's just very interesting.
Very cool. Now, I often wonder, like, what's that like? Because I think in a few years, a lot of people are going to be entering the quantum field, so to speak, and I'm just wondering, like, kind of like, what's it like in terms of how folks are reacting, and You know, because I would imagine that this was a very quiet field, you know, 5, 10 years ago. Now suddenly venture fund money starting to flow. There's going to be a lot more um, people showing up who are not physicists. And I was just wondering what the culture is like. Has the culture kind of in the quantum space changed any since you started doing this work?
I mean, so I feel that the quantum industry is very welcoming, and it's like a nice industry. People are nice, and at least comparing with maybe some other tech industries. But I do feel there is a change that it's like it feels more real, and with this like more real as in, you know, it's getting closer and closer. Like it's more in the market, it's more professional maybe. So probably it might be that, you know, there will be less place for you know, just creative projects, and everything will be more focused on the users and clients and the market. So, but it's good, right? Like, I mean, the development is amazing, and that's good. But I definitely can see, you know, even when I joined, like those 6 years ago, it was still, I feel it was still a very different time.
Right. I mean,
Right.
6 years ago, you weren't hearing about AI on the news constantly.
No.
And you
That's
certainly
true.
weren't hearing about quantum, right? So everyone must have thought, like, what is she actually working on? And not understanding it at all, because unless you're like within certain circles, right?
Yeah, I think 6 years ago it was still like, you know, saying that, you know, I'm going to Hogwarts or something like this. And right now, and you mentioned AI, and I think there's a lot of hype about quantum, right? It's based on AI, so it feels like, oh, maybe we missed the AI a bit, but then like we can't miss the next train, which will be quantum. But it definitely feels like something much more real.
That
So
makes sense.
how do you yourself keep updated? I mean, you're on the cusp of emerging tech, but you still want to keep up to date on other emerging trends. So how do you keep updated on what's going on in the industry?
So with the quantum industry, to be honest, it's mostly that, first of all, I work within the industry. So there's a lot that I hear from my colleagues, you know, conferences and the company. LinkedIn, I think that's probably news-wise from the quantum side. That's probably my main source. Yeah, and you know, like whenever there is an interesting link, then to read something more. I don't know if I'm that updated, but probably a bit. Enough for
Interesting.
the design part, at least.
So is there something that you're currently working on that you can speak about that you're that's really excited about, or can you talk about it in a particularly vague way?
So there is, for example, a project we released recently at Classic. It's interactive visualization. It's something I actually presented at last year at the APS Global Summit. So we have in our software, so the in our software, users can write the algorithms in this high-level language we call QMOT. And then there is a compiler that takes this high-level algorithm and produces this gate-level quantum circuit that can be also optimized for different hardwares, different preferences, constraints, depending on whatever the user wants. And then we made this visualization tool that takes both this algorithm, the intent of the algorithm, and the gate level implementation, and showcases it in a in an interactive way. So users can in a very intuitive way, they, even with the huge algorithms, they can see the different parts, they can debug easier, but they can also use it for presentations, for conveying, whatever they were working on, for easier collaboration. And then from there, of course, it can be also executed on different simulators or hardware. But it's really interesting because we're basing this on the visualizations of quantum circuits. So there are, both what you see in papers, but also there are like a number of interactive tools. But I think we added there a few different features that make it, first of all, very, very useful for large circuits and large algorithms. And the number of qubits wouldn't even matter that much, at least in just, visualization wise. And I think it's something that is very exciting for me, because I think it has a lot of value, and it kind of has this, I feel like we're looking to the future a bit, where at certain point we will be talking about much larger algorithms and much more qubits to be used. So it's something that it's already released, but we're constantly working on this, and we're adding more and more features.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay.
How do you mentor or support others who are entering your field? Have you been a mentor? Have you been affected by having a great mentor?
So first of all, there are just so many people, of course, that, I've met and I've worked with that helped me enter this field, and then to understand this field. Because, when you enter this field without any prior knowledge, it can feel a bit intimidating. And I think that's something that a lot of people feel. And I found that, people were actually really welcoming and really wanted to share their knowledge. So I think especially all the physicists that I've met and I've worked with along the way, that's something, at some points I felt that, I'm this amazing situation where I have all those, people who are experts in quantum physics, and they are teaching me this, and it's part of my job. I'm getting paid for this, so I feel like that's a dream job. But I do also have, like people sometimes asking me, people who want to enter this field, or maybe someone who's working with me and they're just starting. So I always try to help them, because I feel like, I understand that it can be intimidating to be a non-physicist in this field. And also I feel like physicists sometimes forget that not everyone knows this very specific language they use to describe quantum physics. So I feel I still remember a bit better that, not everyone knows what superposition. Yeah, so that's, definitely really like to talk with anyone who needs help or has questions.
What would be your advice to someone who is looking at this field, whether they're an industrial designer like you, or a marketer, or just a developer, right? Like, or, or even salespeople, like what would be your advice, right? Because you did bring up some interesting things, right? So like, what would be your advice? Are there any books that you could read, or any webinars or anything like that to kind of get familiar with this space?
So I think if this is a more technical person, especially for, like from the software development side, there's a lot of hackathons, there's a lot of courses, there are, a lot of great resources. So I think it's definitely good to start there. Also because many times the companies are maybe sponsoring part of the hackathon, maybe they're doing some challenges. So you also have you have an opportunity to meet people from this company. but also in general to reach out to people. I think it's still a very friendly industry, and it's quite a small industry. So I think people are very, very open usually. It's definitely good to, I think right now there's quite a lot of introductory books and podcasts, videos. Penny Lane, they have so many amazing resources. Qiskit, of course, Classic as well. So I think it's just good to, just start by watching different things. And it's not an industry for everyone, I think. So if someone feels it's interesting, then I think there's more and more resources to find.
That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. Where do you think the quantum industry is going to go? I mean, I think it's nowhere to go but up, really. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm definitely hoping for that. Yeah, I feel, I think there is a lot of funding now, and there's a lot of amazing people working on this. So I do feel, and there's a lot of development, constant development. So I think at this point, everyone kind of believes that it's just a matter of time.
Right.
So yeah, so definitely, I cross my fingers for the quantum industry.
That's a good way to put it. What? I totally lost my train of thought, Candace. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. So if you could go back to the beginning of your career, what advice would you give yourself, knowing what you know now?
So one thing that I like about my career, and maybe it's not for everyone, but I feel like I always followed what was interesting for me. And that's not always maybe, best for, if you're very like career driven and you want to, immediately go to, the best, I don't know, best paying jobs, or I think, I made all sorts of decisions that weren't, I would change my career suddenly. I would look for different things that were just at the moment really interesting. But for me, it really worked. And for me, it's something that in the end means that I can work on the projects that I'm personally really interested in and I find fascinating. So I don't think it's good advice for everyone, and because it might take time. It might mean that you're not finding what you're looking for. But for me, it's something that I'm really happy about. And, I have a 9-year-old daughter, and I really want for her to be curious and to look for things in life that are interesting for her. And I think, obviously she'll choose whatever she wants, but I would like this for her more than, just going, having this very straightforward path, career path. And I find it's more valuable. And also, I think it's important today to be able to change industries and to kind of start over and to start in a new industry. I think that's something valuable, and I think it's something that we'll need more and more because there are just the changes are so fast now.
That's a great way to put it, because the amount of change that we're seeing just in my own career, right? And I mean, I guess I'm old, but I'm not that old. But I mean, I started writing, Visual Basic applications on Wall Street, right? And these were like for, Windows 3.1 or NT. And like, I think about what I do now is just so radically different than what I anticipated I would be doing when I was in university. I don't want to speak for Candace, but I would imagine that working on quantum computing, podcast is probably not it's probably not on your radar, although your dad was working in quantum physics, and you probably I know like her dad was a big shot. She'll be modest, but he was a big shot researcher at IBM back in the
Wow.
day, doing a lot of this kind of early work. And I mean, who would have thought like you would it would become a family business, so to speak.
It's true. I mean, I was in the 70s and talking about, quantum algorithms, and I was the kid that went to school and had no idea what her dad did for a living. And I couldn't even like remotely explain it. But, I was thinking about you mentioned curiosity, you mentioned flexibility and adaptability as things that you really value in a skill set. Are there other skills that you found that have been critical to your success?
Definitely the ability to work with people and with people from different industries, to listen to people. It maybe like sounds obvious, but I don't think it is for everyone. And I never feel that I have like this ownership even over the design part of the projects, because many times the ideas come from the non-designers, or many times my ideas, I think it's a great idea, but then others don't think so, and that's okay. And I think this is really important. And to do a good project, it's always a teamwork. And I really love working in teams where we all come with a very different background. I think this is what makes for interesting projects.
Yeah, and you're seeing a lot more of that. It used to be like, you would have kind of like one industry, one this, one that, but over the last probably 2 decades or so, like, it becomes like, you have people who work in a chemistry company, right? They're doing AI, right? Well, what are they doing AI for, right? There's, research, there's marketing, there's, kind of like it's all these different. I think the idea of being in one discipline and kind of just staying in that discipline for the rest of your working career is going to be looked back as a very quaint notion of the 20th century.
I think it's even hard to do this anymore.
It would be really tough. Like, and I know people that have kind of found that kind of like little groove and stayed in it, but there's really no growth there, right? And the ones that did stay there are very larger reasons why they can't afford to stay there, right? Not all of that is entirely, lack of will. It's just kind of like um, there's no incentive to change, and hey man, if you can make it work for you, go for it. But I don't think that would work for me. My attention span is too short.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, um, I love working with non-designers,
Mhm.
and I feel it. I mean, I also love working with designers.
Right.
But yeah, throughout my career, I think I always really like working with, the domain experts, or people that are expert in something very different. For example, with Classic, on the project that I told you about with the visualization. So we were, like this core team that at the beginning we were working on the whole idea of this. And then, of course, there was a lot of people involved, and all the amazing software engineers and so on. But at the beginning, a lot of work was, for example, with a person who's a language designer. And this was really interesting for me because we needed to find this visual representation for the language, the programming language that he was designing. So it's really interesting, and it's something that like I would never have this perspective or this knowledge to be able to do this. So I think this is all those complementary skills, and all the different experiences that we have. I think that's when it's combined, that's when the interesting things happen.
That's a good way to put it. I think that we live in a very. Actually, tell me more about this language designer, right? So, like, I mean, you did say computer programming language, but not necessarily human language. So, what does that
Yes.
look like? And like, how does that? Because I would imagine that there's probably significant overlap with industrial design with that. Or there
So
is, maybe there isn't. I don't know. Like,
so I don't, I don't know if I have much to say about his work. It's probably
mhm,
maybe you can invite him.
be awesome.
But so this is the main person behind again, obviously it's teamwork. But the person behind the programming language that we're developing at Classic. And he's an expert in this. This is something that he did before as well. So this is from my design perspective. That was really interesting because we suddenly had to find a way to visualize certain things that they designed in code for this different kind of interface. Yeah.
Interesting. No, it's all very fascinating. Like all this stuff is just, there's just so much going on. It's kind of in some ways very frustrating, but in some ways very cool. I don't know. Maybe I'm not explaining it right, but
I mean, we learn new things with every interview that we do. And then when we think we're understanding something, then something else just kind of opens it up completely. And then you realize, no, I didn't quite understand that quite yet. There's more to learn. There's more to grasp, right? I mean, when you have to, I usually ask this obviously earlier in the interview, but because you're involved, although you're involved in the design in quantum computing is just, a lot of people still can't wrap their minds around it. So like, how do you explain what you do within the sector of quantum computing to, for example, a non-technical individual?
that's a great question.
That's a good question. And I'm working on this for the last 6 years, and I don't know if I'm getting any better. But sometimes I lose people when I say quantum computing, and that's it. They're like, "Oh, okay, that's enough." Yeah, but I'm saying, that I'm working on the graphical user interfaces for quantum computing, which is this new developing field, and I'm working a lot with scientists. And we're working on something that is different, and it's a way to interact with this totally new, weird technology that isn't always intuitive, and we try to make it more intuitive.
That's
Good way to put
perfect.
it. That's a
I
good
think
way to
so.
put it. I think also an excellent place to end the show, because I want to be respectful of your time, and I know it's late where you are. Where can folks find out more about you and about Classic? I did it again,
What?
Candace.
I know it's the Q.
It's the
It's the
Q.
Q. You want it to be special.
So she lives in Montreal, and half my family is from Montreal. So like I see the IQ ending, and immediately like the francophone inside my head goes off. Like
Yeah, exactly.
that
It's true.
circuit fires, and it's like Classic. So Classic. Where can folks find out more about you and Classic?
Yeah, so Classic, I guess the website would be the best place, and the social media profiles. People at Classic are very friendly, so it's always good to reach out as well. And if someone wants to reach out to me, I love this as well. And I guess LinkedIn is usually the best way to be in touch.
Excellent.
Quantum Podcast, turn it up fast. Candace and Frank blowing my mind at last. Quantum Podcast, they're breaking the mold. Science and sky beats, it's bold and it's gold. The multiverse is skanking in time. Black holes are wailing in a horn line so fine. From Planck scales to planets, they're connecting the dots. Candace and Frank, they're the cosmic hot shot. Quantum Podcast, turn it up fast. Candace and Frank blowing my mind at last. Quantum Podcast, they're breaking the mold. Science and sky beats, it's bold and it's it's gold.